We think our model gives us a 25%, 30% a year growth capability. Call it 15 to 20 of that's on the acquisition side. And we think we can do double digits just organically in the kinds of businesses that we get involved with just by upping the game on sales and marketing and just being more attentive to just strategy. So that's kind of the model. And then so if you look back at maybe Hawk and you look back at Bridge in general and TransTech, that's usually about where we end up. I mean, we think we can keep doubling the size of these businesses over a 3 to 5 year period.
Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Jeff Berlin, founder and president of Bridge Industries and chairman and CEO of TransTech Energy. Jeff's journey spans from his early days at Parker Hannifin to helping grow Hawk Corporation from a $20 million single plant business into a $200 million global operation. Jeff then took the entrepreneurial leap in 2004, founding his own company, Bridge, an industrial holding company anchored by TransTech that has quietly scaled into a multi-$100 million enterprise from its base in Chagrin Falls. In our conversation today, we cover Jeff's conviction in the importance of American manufacturing and how it has shaped his career-long commitment to building enduring businesses. We cover the creation of Bridge Industries and his intentional choice of choosing a permanent holding company model over a traditional private equity one. We cover the over 25-fold scaling of TransTech into a diversified industrial platform with over 700 employees from 35 just a decade earlier. We covered the lessons learned along the way, the resilience and philosophy that guide him, how to weather downturns, usefulness as a true measure of value and success, culture across companies, and a whole lot more. Jeff is an incredible entrepreneur, and I am grateful to share this conversation with you today. Please enjoy. Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Roundstone Insurance. Headquartered in Rocky River, Ohio, Roundstone shares Lay of the Land's same passion for bold ideas and lasting impact from our community's entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Since 2005, Roundstone has pioneered a self-funded captive health insurance model that delivers robust savings for small and medium-sized businesses. They are part of the solution to rising healthcare costs, helping employers offer affordable, high-quality care while driving job creation and economic growth throughout Northeast Ohio. Like many of the voices featured on Lay of the Land, including Roundstone's founder and CEO Mike Schroeder, Roundstone believes entrepreneurship, innovation, and community to be the cornerstones of progress. To learn more about how Roundstone is transforming employee health benefits by empowering employers to save thousands in per employee per year healthcare costs, please visit RoundstoneInsurance.com. Roundstone Insurance, built for entrepreneurs, backed by innovation, committed to Cleveland. So I'm always thinking about where the best place to start these conversations is. And for ours today, I wanted to start with, where would you say your belief in the importance and viability of American manufacturing and, then consequentially the significance of building businesses in that space for the long run stems from?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to being born in sort of Cleveland, Midwest, call it the Rust Belt, is what we all called it when we were growing up. I think that had big impact on me. I think one of the things that will probably come up in our discussion is that I just love kind of Cleveland. I love the environment. I mean, my wife and I, family, we wouldn't think of being anywhere else. So I think that was probably the early roots, and then just being somewhat fortunate, picking Parker Hannifin as my first job out of college, where I didn't have any formal background in manufacturing or engineering. I had a finance background, but the program they had there really immersed young people in operations. They just sent you to a site and said, go figure it out. And I just loved it. I mean, these were people who were there showing up every day, often 3 shifts, making some type of a product. And I just found it fascinating. So I think kind of those early roots and then the first job that kind of sealed that for me.
So you grew up here in Northeast Ohio. You began your career in the industrial world at Parker Hannifin. When you reflect on that time, what were the kind of formative experiences during those years that shaped the kind of business leader and entrepreneur that you've become?
I think kind of call it college and working, I would say fortunate that I had a lot of independence. I mean, one could say maybe there was some downside to that, but I had a very independent youth where it was kind of on me to decide and pay for college and things like that. So that had a big impact on me to take responsibility and kind of the importance of planning. And so coming out of school, I had no idea whatsoever what I wanted to do. So I just interviewed with a wide variety of, this was at Miami of Ohio, wide variety of companies. And it just kind of, and I was I was a accounting major. And so a lot of the steering was towards, at the time, it was the big eight accounting firms. It just didn't resonate with me. It just wasn't a fit for me, really. I don't think I was a services type of person. It was a very generic interview typically. And then I put Parker Hannifin on the interview schedule. I literally did not know who they were. I didn't know it was a law firm, consulting firm, and until I researched it before the meeting. And this is, I call this sort of one of my first good breaks where, I happened to meet a guy who sitting here today is on our board of directors. So 41 years ago, met a
Wow.
person who I identified with, and he recruited me to Parker Hannifin, Tim Pistel, who became the CFO of Parker Hannifin. And so we've had a relationship for 41 years, friends, worked on boards together, and he sits on our board today. So those were some of those early foundational things that kind of just taught me a lot, watching people like Tim and watching people at Parker Hannifin and the way it's a very well organized business, but its roots are acquisitions. And most of the companies are small, and the way they operated were really similar to the way that we operate today, which is, very decentralized, very much relying on those businesses to, yeah, they operate under a plan, but they've got to go out there and make it work in local, in usually small towns. Usually they're less than 150 people. So I learned a lot in those early years.
What were the seeds that were planted that ultimately sprouted and grew into your desire to kind of emulate that model, if you will, for yourself? Where did you begin thinking about that as an idea?
It probably took a while to germinate, as you can imagine. I think, each step of the way you learn a little something. And I think one of the things I picked up at Parker Hannifin was that I probably was not a big company person. The process of getting from where I was to maybe where I wanted to be sounded like it was going to take a long time, and some of it was not under my control. And so I kind of probably was able to check the big company box very early and realize that, okay, I'm probably not going to end up with a career at a big company, but I still didn't know enough about acquisitions or financing. So the next few steps really filled in those blanks. I had the opportunity to work with a few people who, I just learned a lot from, in terms of how do you structure an acquisition? How do you work with banks and every part of the stack, whether it was venture or private equity or every part of it. So I gained a lot of experience, and that was pre-Hawk. So I had a lot of that experience going into the first, what I would call large opportunity, as, more of a leader.
How would you describe the chapter of your career that was Hawk?
It was really transformational. Once again, I kind of call that probably my second break where, where it's like, happened to, I literally walked into the office of Ron Weinberg, who was somebody I had met through earlier in my career in the deal world. He was well known as a financier. Walked into his office. I did not know what he had going on. It was Weinberg Capital. He and Norm Harbert, who had an operating background, had purchased a company in Medina, which made friction materials. And the timing just was pretty good when I walked in. I think they needed somebody to kind of figure out what to do with it. It's a great company, good cash flow, but didn't even have computers at the time. And so, no systems. they just needed somebody to go figure it out. And they gave me that opportunity. So they took a chance on me. And I kind of took a chance as well. I kind of took a pay cut and wasn't as worried about the current pay, but it really transformational from a company of 90 people that we grew to be 1,700 people all over the world, with me being given a leadership role at a very young age, going through an IPO, multiple financings. I mean, it was more than you could ever imagine over a 10-year period.
What do you hold as the most important learnings from that chapter and just getting to see such a meteoric growth of an organization?
I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I think I grew as a, call it a manager, a leader. I mean, because I worked under several people that were very good. I worked at a peer level with several people who were like general managers of businesses or former business owners that we then partnered with. I learned a lot. And then, kind of the school of hard knocks. That's a business that we had a lot of cyclical parts of the business. So we went through years of, I know that was one of your questions, just the resilience that you have to face when you see a market go down 60 or 70% in a year. It was amazing. So I learned a lot. I had the good finance background, maybe call it acquisition background. I learned a lot about sales and marketing, the whole distribution side of the business, the back office, support systems side of it. A lot about engineering and fabrication. It was kind of a closet engineer. So I just loved following around the engineers and the people doing R&D and learning from them. So yeah, just every aspect. It was just a great learning experience.
What did you learn about resilience and kind of cultivating the capability to weather drawback like 67% of a market?
Yeah. So I think step one is, I mean, staying calm. I think for whatever reason, have always been able to kind of take a step back, collect yourself, don't overreact. I think a lot of it is how you prepare, because in the kinds of businesses I've been in, if you have all the chips on the table and you're over leveraged and you're not ready for something bad to happen, then you're going to be in trouble. I don't think you can overcome it. So, we always tried to prepare, but several, like 9/11 was a good example where a big part of our business was replacement parts for commercial aircraft. Well, when there are no commercial aircraft flying, that's a tough business. And so, you have to cut costs, you have to get the team together, and pay cuts, every aspect of what do you need to do to keep payroll going and keep as many people as you can to live for that next step. And so it's all how you communicate it. It's making sure the team understands what you're doing, why. Yeah, I really learned a lot through those periods.
What would you say was your third big break?
Yeah, but I would say it probably would be that decision to start Bridge, the format that I started it under, which was almost what I would call a blank sheet of paper. Don't go raise money. Don't call yourself a private equity firm. I called myself an industrial holding company. Figured we would see what happens. Go buy a business and see what happens. So really doing that instead of maybe something a little more complicated, which would have been, get some partners, raise a lot of money, commit to something that was more formal. I think it ended up being a good decision because I just learned a lot through the process of building up Bridge.
I want to unpack your description there of what Bridge was by design, the intentionality around it. What does an industrial holding company mean?
So it's a pretty generic term, obviously, but to me, I'll tell you what it meant to me. What it meant to
Yeah.
me was that we're in business to acquire, and typically our target has been family businesses where it's an entrepreneur or second or third generation entrepreneur family member who is ready to sell the business for one reason or another. And usually in our case, the best fit is where that reason includes, hey, I need a partner who can help me grow the business. It's usually we can deal with, now that we're larger, we can deal with the people who are saying, hey, I'm retiring and I'm done. we can deal with the companies that need a lot of help, and it's a bit of a turnaround. But at the time when I was starting, I really needed other sets of hands, so to speak. So I didn't have a team. So, we really looked for companies that had an entrepreneurial family background, but they needed something. They needed systems. They needed maybe some of the background that I had in terms of general management or finance or distribution. And then it also had to be a little bit under the radar because, as you know, the market well, I wasn't going to go out and compete with Riverside or other private equity firms to see who could pay the most for the company that had a perfect customer list, growth of 15% a year every year. That wasn't going to be the market for me. I had to find things that were a little under the radar.
I'm very interested also in your intentionality around maybe the explicit differentiation between yourself and traditional private equity. Why did you decide to go one route over the other? And when you think about the incentives that drive certain decision making that typical private equity backed companies might face that you were not going to as a consequence of this intentional choice, how do you think about what those advantages were? Why were they important to you? And just how you were thinking about it?
Yeah, I think just in your question, you hit upon probably the number one factor to me, which was that I think the decision-making process that has to be in private equity, because their job is to give money back and to do it on a regular basis. That concept just doesn't resonate with me and what I think is necessary to really do a good job building a company long term. And I also felt at the time when I set up Bridge that there would be companies out there, families, entrepreneurs who would agree with that. They would say, hey, I am not in this so that, 5 years I can get another bite at the apple and work with some people that I see once a quarter and I send financials to. I was more interested in the people who were like, hey, my business is 10 million. I can take it to 50. Let's partner with Bridge and figure out how to do that. We'll have a lot of upside because we really try to be entrepreneurial in the way we structure deals also. So it almost always involves the seller retaining equity almost immediately. The team then gets incentivized with options, and we really want people to think like owners.
So I don't think it would be a stretch to say that what you wrote down on paper is something that you've been able to realize. And not only that, but at a scale that is, I'm curious if you had even kind of envisioned at the time. But when you think about what you were able to build in terms of this industrial holding company, you've taken a group, anchored by TransTech, which we can talk about, but from, an order of magnitude of 8 figures, dozens of employees to many 9 figures and hundreds of employees at a national, now international scale, orders of magnitude increase in the size of the business. And I'm just very interested in that kind of trajectory that Bridge has been on, and overall the strategies and the tactics that you've put in place to realize such an accomplishment. And so with that kind of framing, when you reflect on the journey of Bridge itself, how is it that you think about those chapters, the strategies and the tactics? And, we can kind of take those in different parts over time. What was it when you had industrial holding company? Is this what you had in mind it would look like today when you were starting?
It's pretty close because keep in mind, if you go back to Hawk, it's essentially what we built there. So I had kind of a dress rehearsal where we started with one company, and what we ended up doing was, and I was the point person. So we had one company. My job was to not only make sure that company was running well, diversifying, growing. What else can we buy to make the overall business more valuable? And so we were in the friction material industry. We found a couple of adjacent industries, and what we ended up with at Hawk was kind of 3 primary groups. We added the structural powder metal group, which was similar to the same type of technology that we use for friction materials. And then we also added a performance business that was in things like motorsports. And so we kind of same strategy as Bridge, where we'd get into these businesses. They typically needed a lot of help. At Hawk, the difference was we built a little bit more of a corporate structure. And then the sheer act of going public, as you can imagine, required just a lot more support from the kind of legal, finance, HR standpoint. Learned a lot with that. Probably not looking, I don't aspire to do another IPO because I think for this type of business, it bogs you down a little bit. I'm not saying there's no possibility, but it just doesn't seem like a great fit for the model that works with this type of business.
So what was your strategy as you got started?
So with Bridge,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll kind of walk you through it. It's the simple strategy. Number one is I explained this to my wife and friends is when I went on my own, I could be unemployed for 6 months. It could be 3 years, could be more than that because it involves buying a business. So strategy one is you have to come to an agreement with another party. And when you're starting out, you also have to have the discipline. And I think there were probably 4 or 5 of these that you spend a lot of time and money, your own money, on diligence, and you can't get a deal done either because you can't get an agreement done or you find something in diligence. So, the first step to the strategy is just find a company that you think has some whatever it is that I see that may be unique. It could be a market opportunity. It could be just the team. It's always relates to the team. Is it a team that you can work with? Is a team you feel like, okay, they're receptive to growth? That's always a key for us, no matter what. And then once you have an entry point, then you can go to work and really try to learn the business. So you go to trade shows, you visit customers, you do a deep dive with every technical person in the company, and then slowly but surely help them guide the strategy of the business. It's not Bridge or me or that we have some amazing insight. It's coaching up the team so that they're broadening the lens and just looking at the markets differently. How do we develop new products? How do we grow internationally or nationally or internationally? How do we add more automation to the product line? How do we train our people? But all the blocking and tackling that's needed. Almost every business we get involved with, if there were 10 boxes to check, they may have three or four, which is great. And we try to check as many of the other ones as possible.
So take us through in practice that first acquisition, actually getting started there.
Right. It's a great example where my strategy, you said, what's the strategy? I figured, boy, I'm going to use all the background I had from Hawk. So think industrial markets, a lot of aftermarket. I knew the customers. I knew everything about it. Couldn't find anything there. So the first acquisition I found made equipment for the oil and gas industry. I had no background whatsoever in the oil and gas industry. So there's a company in Millersburg, Ohio that made equipment that helped efficiently remove fluids from wells. So think about the old days of vertical wells. You would build up water and oil. As the well got older, you didn't have enough pressure to release that. And so this system would literally send a device up and down the well to pump out the fluids and make the well more efficient. It was a great technology. Company of 40 people in Millersburg. And so we figured we could grow it regionally. Most of the customer base was, think about the old vertical wells in Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia.
Yeah.
Great customer base. And to me, the beauty of it was there was a replacement market. So everyone who had our equipment would have to buy replacement parts as the wells continued to operate. And these are wells that you would have sat and projected were going to be around for 15, 20, 30 years. However, the shale revolution hit, say 2 years after bought the business. And then I had a front row seat to see that whole industry develop. And it was a great learning experience, but it really shook up our business plan because all those vertical wells, we had 3,500 vertical wells that had our equipment. Say you could take 400 of those wells and turn it into maybe 3 wells that were running, horizontal fracked wells that now were going down 10,000 feet with laterals. and everything you've probably read about. So fascinating, but scary, because we had to develop new equipment that would work in that environment. And no matter what we could do, there were going to be fewer of them because there were going to be fewer wells. So great learning experience. We built the team. We built a national footprint. We opened offices. We had a lot of ups and downs. I characterize that as just, it was a 10-year process where we built it up and we ultimately sold it to a strategic buyer. Call it a solid single. Really one of those where I was kind of lucky just to keep it. And we grew the business, but learned a lot. And it led to the second opportunity, which I think has always been maybe where we excel. And that is just keeping our eyes open, meeting people in the industry, looking, understanding, getting better at evaluating companies. So Cimarron, which was our second acquisition, was a direct beneficiary of the shale development. And they made production equipment, which was everything that sits above a well where the oil and water goes into that unit and gas. It all gets separated. The gas gets dried and put in a pipeline. The oil and water gets separated. They go into tanks. And this equipment just keeps running, obviously 24/7. I had a customer that was buying equipment from us who had an opportunity to grow his business. Used to have breakfast with him probably monthly in Colorado, which is where he was located. He was always talking about growing the business. Finally, I just said, if this is what you want to do, what's holding you back? Why aren't you doing it? And he said, well, capital and this and that. And I said, okay, here's what we'll do. I'll buy half the business and we will grow the business. Because that was a huge opportunity for him. So he went from a single site where they were doing just repair work in Colorado for production equipment to where we acquired an actual fabrication shop in Oklahoma that made the whole system. And then we created a national footprint. So they were able to leverage off some of our sales relationships from that original business. We opened up new offices, and long story short, we took it from about 10 to 150 million in revenue in 3.5 years, and then sold it to a public company, Curtis Wright. So that wouldn't have happened if I didn't go through a 10-year. Well, at the time it wasn't 10 years, but 4 or 5 years of learning with the multi-products experience.
So, and this will, I think, permeate the whole rest of the discussion as well as what we've already talked about. But I mean, you mentioned kind of the beginning of the geographic expansion of the business. How do you manage that scale of geography spread across all over while keeping such a lean corporate structure? How do you think about the actual organization itself and Bridge as an entity, relative to your holding companies? What is your relationship in that regard?
Yeah, so it's always evolving, so, sitting here today, we have a total of 7 people located in Northeast Ohio. We'll probably continue to add incrementally as we support, finance, HR, IT, corporate development. We'll probably continue to increase that footprint. But the one thing we don't aspire to be is sitting in the 10th floor of a tower somewhere in downtown Cleveland with a huge staff. I think it's not the message that we're trying to send to the partner companies. So really part of our job is to figure out what's the right amount of corporate support. And so I would say maybe I've erred on the side of being a little behind the curve, which it could be a strength, maybe it's a weakness. But, I think what we've built now is a team that really is, it's where we need to be. So, we have the finance and IT and corporate development support. We spend a lot of time at the companies. So our job is not to sit here and think and strategize. It's really to be in front of the folks that that are part of Bridge, part of TransTech, hearing what they need from a capital standpoint or strategy standpoint. And then we are responsible for really helping them just do a better job of their own planning, their own recruiting, their own business plan and reporting every month. So it's an ongoing process. We'll continue to support the businesses, but we don't ever expect to have like a really large corporate staff.
So you mentioned TransTech there. I feel it might be a good time to, introduce them into the whole conversation here, what is TransTech, and how did that come into the Bridge fold?
Yeah, so yeah, this would have taken place. We already had, I think at the time we actually had multi products and Cimarron were still part of Bridge. And we're always looking, and so we're always looking for what's the next opportunity company that we think we can build. So, and I can't explain how it happens sometimes, but this was just a blind email that I got from a broker. I have, just from a lot of years, have a lot of brokers that I've worked with, and I love the one or two person shops, and they're in Tulsa or they're a small town. I get these all the time. I always respectfully will look at them and respond, hey, not a fit. In this case, it was worth talking to the people. It was a business that was in the mostly propane industry. What they did was they kind of rebuilt equipment, and they installed systems, and it was a family business, very entrepreneurial. And I just had an introductory call where I met the founder and actually his brother-in-law. And it was a conversation like that where I just heard a lot of things that interested me. I thought that this company, for a relatively small size business, had a lot of skill set, but also had a lot of growth opportunity because they were somewhat pigeonholed in the southeastern US, located in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. They had none of their own production capability. So everything they did, if when they would get an opportunity to, and think infrastructure. So they would provide things like tanks and pumps and vaporizers, systems that somebody would use at a propane distribution site or a backup power facility. And they had all the skills needed to put all that together. They just didn't make the equipment. So we thought there'd be an opportunity to provide, vertically integrate a little bit. Kind of jumping to the kind of the next step, we partnered with them. This guys kept some equity, kind of locked hands on a business plan, and then we set out from Bridge to figure out, okay, how do we get manufacturing capability to help this company become more of a national player and grow into some of the markets that we knew, which I'd say traditional energy, upstream, midstream, where a lot of their equipment could be used also. But historically, that's not the market they were approaching. So we uncovered, actually, we started with a subcontract relationship with Mitsubishi, they had a wind tower facility in McGregor, Texas. And this is probably a typical story for us where we got to know the people and we had them
Mm-hmm.
make tanks for us. So think about very large 90,000 gallon tanks that are, 120 feet long and require very custom freight capabilities and things like that, heavy lifting. Well, it's not that dissimilar than a wind tower. And so they had the equipment needed. We just had them just start making our product. Getting to know them, we realized the wind side of it was just not going well for them. They picked the wrong time. It was a very competitive market. So Mitsubishi at a corporate level was interested in selling this unit, and we were in the right place at the right time. We got to know the people. We bought the business, and it came with 100 acres in McGregor, Texas, facility that had dirt floors and not a lot of equipment because it never quite was fully baked, but it was making some of our equipment. And then we invested a lot of time and money in turning it into a full production shop. And hindsight now is great. I mean, it's a great facility. Our neighbor there is SpaceX. So down the road from us is a facility where they're testing rocket engines. We also do work with them. And we've seen that whole area grow up. So think between Dallas, this is, the Waco area, McGregor, Texas is kind of between Dallas and Austin, and it's all kind of coming together. So it's a very good location for what we do. So then we kept advancing the business plan. How do we add a market here? The companies that we've acquired over time with TransTech are typically filling a gap, something we've already decided we want to do, a company we've already met. It could take 3 years to foster that relationship, but we keep refining our business plan. And then the other thing that's key for us in the acquisition process is, like you read about aqua hiring or whatever, which is a fancy term, which is something I've always believed in, which is this is where we get our people. I mean, these are great folks that we're typically finding in the acquisition process where, maybe they were held back by, an entrepreneurial owner that didn't want to put money in family business. Maybe it was a corporate owned entity. And usually we can free that up and kind of a lot of these teams are ready to execute and they just need the right partner. So that's a common theme for us as well. So yeah, so over time I would tell you that the model, TransTech's probably a good example because we're 10 years into it. We think our model gives us a 25%, 30% a year growth capability. Call it 15 to 20 of that's on the acquisition side. And we think we can do double digits just organically in the kinds of businesses that we get involved with just by upping the game on sales and marketing and just being more attentive to just strategy. So that's kind of
Hmm.
the model. And then so if you look back at maybe Hawk and you look back at Bridge in general and TransTech, that's usually about where we end up. I mean, we think we can keep doubling the size of these businesses over a 3 to 5 year period.
Well, I mean, and ultimately that's something you've been able to realize from the outside, seems like it's grown 25x over the last decade or so. As the business model evolves, opportunistically, companies that you come across that you feel are accretive to the broader story, what would you say is the vision itself for TransTech? How do you keep the ambition and vision of the company as the business model itself might change?
So we spent a lot of time going through the process of having a mission statement, core values, kind of rallying the team around core values. TransTech, we have that. I think what the vision there really relates to. Yeah, the team's very excited about growth. The team's very excited about this why this international expansion is so well timed because I think we have a team that's hungry for finding the next frontier. What's the next challenge? So yeah, that's kind of what's motivating everyone. We're all pretty competitive and we're in competitive markets. So we love situations where we're competing against, companies that are much larger. A lot of people hadn't heard of TransTech. The name's actually getting to be better known now. We've invested a lot in kind of marketing that name a little bit more. And we don't ignore the original company names either. I think that's important to us when we're partnering with somebody like Bendel, which is a company in Charlotte. That was important to them. I mean, it was the guy's dad who founded the business, and their name was part of that name. And we'll usually commit to people and say, look, we have no reason to change the name of that shop. Going to have the Bendel name on it. It'll be part of TransTech, but we try to preserve some of that local culture as well.
What is the importance to you of vertical integration, and how do you kind of think through that holistically in this acquisition process?
I mean, it's been a pretty common theme for us. I think it gives you a little more control of your destiny. You can act a little quicker. I think you can respond to customers quicker. You're taking layers out of the process. I think you'll learn a lot along the way. I don't think you do it just for the sake of doing it, but the kinds of businesses we've gotten involved with, it usually plays, an important role of strategy.
When you acquire a company, what have you learned about the integration process and the right alignment of incentives and how to maintain the entrepreneurial spirit that got them to where they were as you continue to go forward? Just kind of your reflections on the playbook of what integration looks like.
Right. And I wish I could share the screen and show you our latest version because it evolves. And I think
Yeah.
when I first, when I first, we did a lot of work at Hawk on integration and, had I wouldn't call it sophisticated, but well-developed model. When I started at Bridge, I specifically did not have that. And so I kind of, you started with the first and second acquisition, kind of a little bit of seat of the pants, get in, figure it out, figured they were small companies, but clearly we've had to progress and evolve. So yeah, we have a pretty detailed program now. And we try to do it in kind of your traditional 30, 60, 90 right out of the box. What are the things that we need to get done? And it's really well detailed. spent a lot of time with the team on the other side as well before we even closed the deal to get everybody prepared for the process. And then we keep adding to the playbook. I do admire the companies that maybe are a little larger and they are really quick and efficient to saying, okay, you're going to be using this ERP system. This is the way you're going to report. This is, I think that's great. We're not there yet, right? So we're getting ready to, I think the last few deals we've closed, a lot of these companies still have QuickBooks if they have anything. So we actually just acquired two businesses from a large private company where our responsibility was to take the people and the IP. That's all we got. We didn't get a facility. We didn't get any IP software, anything. So we had to stand it up completely. So our team here has had to make that happen. So we kind of, I guess we have to be a little bit flexible in the way the integration plan works. We keep evolving it. We'd like it to go quicker. I think we're a step short of always saying, here's your TransTech playbook. Start doing this day one. Forget about your culture, right? So we're really attentive to trying to get the cultures to blend. But as you can imagine, that's a challenge. You start to get larger, it becomes harder to make that happen.
How would you describe what the culture is?
I will tell you there's an overall culture. And then, if you go to any one facility, because we're all over the country and now world, you're going to see some local culture there. But we're pretty competitive group, a group that they want to win versus the competition, very concerned about their team. So we kind of big discussion that we have is, how are we helping our team? How are we helping the community? And how are we helping our customers and vendors? It's kind of, that's part of our whole core value statement. And it's, people live by that. So when, we have a team member that needs some help, or a community that needs some help, we just actually, because of our location in McGregor, the flooding there were a number of people that were impacted, and our team really, stepped up and helped out in a lot of ways, and we supported them. So I think it's people oriented and it's growth oriented and it's kind of do the right thing. So safety and the types of businesses that we have is always our number one core value. And so whatever investment is needed in these facilities, sometimes we're acquiring older facilities that don't have all the bells and whistles that we like to see in terms of, safety protocol. We get there quickly. I mean, that's a non-starter. I mean, we always hit hard on safety programs, recording, and the ability to report how we're doing in that program.
Having been in this kind of industry as long as you have and worked with as many business owners and companies across the space, I feel you have probably a pretty unique perspective on just the state of what industrial companies are facing today, and maybe more a bit of the macro landscape that they're operating within. And I'd love to hear your perspective on just where we are as American manufacturing and industry, and what's your kind of outlook on where this is going. I mean, it's kind of interestingly, I feel there's a resurgence in interest in our ability and capability to make things, and all the requisite steps that come with that. And just your take on where we are and where it's going.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question because that was one of the things that on my kind of handmade simple website when first came out with Bridge. I mean, that was one of the things that I made clear was that true believer in American manufacturing and the importance of it. And as I told you, because of the kind of the Midwestern roots and so on, that's always been just a core part of the way we believe. But it's just, I don't think it's something we can give up on. We can't be a country of just services, in my opinion. So I'm generally optimistic. So I've seen companies, I've seen people we compete with, whether it's lower cost areas of Mexico, India, China. We actually put a plant in China when I was at Hawk. That was a great learning experience. But I think the common denominator is there is still a value to having that skill set. And we saw a lot of this through COVID and supply chain issues that we faced. And I'm really happy to see that. I think people learned a lot through that. So to me, you could take both of these things together, the whole manufacturing as well as energy independence, I think are
Yep.
just really important for the US. I mean, we're kind of blessed to be in a position where we can have that. So when I think about it though, I'm not a big fan of like protectionism. So, when it comes to, how do you achieve growth in manufacturing in the US, I don't think that huge tariffs are the answer. I hope we get to a point where we settle it out and maybe it's reciprocal and we can move on, because I think that's causing some disruption right now for a lot of folks making decisions, like our customers who are making big decisions about buying something and they want to wait to see what happens. But generally, I'm very optimistic. I think obviously it's critical for investment, so a lot of things will become more automated. It's not easy to find labor, so I think probably a lot of the people you would talk to would tell you the same thing, that we have a lot of welders, fabricators. These folks, it's just really hard to find, right? These are skilled jobs. There aren't as many folks in the pool, so we have to train a lot of people. So I think it's an area where maybe we just have to educate our youth a little bit more about the value and the attractiveness of these jobs, because you can make a really good living in the trades. So hopefully we don't lose that.
With that all in mind, what is the impact you would ultimately like to have with Bridge and with TransTech?
I look at it as trying to just add value, trying to somewhat, I would use the term be useful. I mean, I heard, I think it was Elon Musk recently quoted, and they were asking him, how does he define success? And he said, I think people need to look at how can you be useful? And I think what we like to encourage our team, like how do we help customers and how do we help our people? And that'll check off a lot of the boxes to being successful. In our case, we have challenging customers, but they have really, really interesting applications, everything from space travel to, to energy, to food production, to the whole renewable space, which we didn't even talk about, which is fascinating. Just, how do you create energy out of a landfill? And these are all things that, we kind of rally around because we think that it's helping the world while also keeping a bunch of people employed and helping their families. And so that's enough to kind of keep us pretty motivated. And that's kind of what keeps our team going.
Yeah, like useful as a barometer for success. Well, I'll pull on that question again a little bit and maybe reframe it with regards to what you see as, I don't know, the growth and future for Bridge. What are your ambitions to grow it? In some regards, you've realized the vision that you wrote down, when you started it to build an industrial holding company. So what do you find is motivating you, and where do you want to take it?
Yeah, I think it's a good timing for that question, because we feel like, and we actually spent a lot of time on strategic planning, and we just updated our 5-year strategic plan. And I think we have a model at called TransTech that transcends and goes forward, and we're pretty excited about. So think about another doubling in the next 4 to 5 years and what that would look like. So then if you go up a level and you say, what can we do at Bridge? We'd like to have another couple of TransTechs. We'd like to find the next TransTech that starts probably, it could be whatever, 15, could be $50 million business, something that we feel could benefit from the same strategy of kind of a long-term approach, investing in, facilities, technology, growing customer base. So we could see there being additional TransTechs under that Bridge umbrella, and then continuing to treat Bridge as a holding company that would supply and support, the finance, HR, IT, corporate development side. So that's kind of what we would see going forward. And then if I, had high aspirations as trying to give you examples, it would be like the Danaher type model, where you have these really, really well-run companies that have over the years really refined their model for how to operate in a manufacturing setting. We would aspire to get to that level.
You mentioned your mentor, maybe former boss from Parker Hannifin, who's been along on this journey with you now for the last 40 years. I'm curious if you were to ask him what surprised him most about the evolution of the business and yourself as a leader, what he might say about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think he has been, yeah, just a supportive kind of mentor and friend, and I think he would give me grief forever having left Parker Hannifin. Like, why would you do that? And then over the years, the relationship pivoted, and as we kind of have worked so closely together, yeah, I think he'd be proud. I think I think he realizes that he's been huge. Hopefully he realizes part of that journey. And I've gotten to know him just through some nonprofit work as well, where we were both on some boards together, and he was really helpful on the multiple sclerosis board where I was chairing the board, and he was extremely supportive, getting involved at a clutch time. So no, I think he would be hopefully proud, and I think he would hopefully take some credit as well, because he's a great sounding board, and he'll tell me when I'm doing something stupid, and he'll give me his opinion. So I appreciate that.
What do you wish more people understood about the nature of your work and what it is that you're building?
Yeah, it's not a great cocktail party discussion because you can't pigeonhole it. Because even my own team, when we're in a group, they're saying, "Yeah, Jeff's in private equity," and say, "Guys, to do that, you actually have to have some equity. You have to have a fund. You have to." I think people generally, just because it's a bit of a unique model, they don't really understand it. I think it would be great if they understood, maybe the value add in terms of job creation, in terms of just, the ability to kind of keep our, as we said earlier, domestic manufacturing, try to continue to invest in it, make people aware of how important it is, things of that nature. I mean, the one area that does resonate with people that I mentioned briefly was this renewable space, which seems to be the one company when I talk about that, people do want to hear more about it. So that's maybe a little sexier, but that's about everything else is infrastructure in it. And so they can't get their arms around, what's behind a pipeline or a processing facility, or how does that food get mixed and then somehow heated or cooled in a certain way. We find it interesting, but it just doesn't always, it is not a great cocktail discussion.
Yeah. Well, it's so obfuscated from, I think, normal day-to-day life that I mean, certainly probably all take it for granted. And so I, what I was kind of curious about is to the degree that, you do spend a lot of your time thinking about infrastructure and all the things that allow for us to have, regular day-to-day life experiences. Um, what you wish people understood about, that world, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So if you were to, you know, you take an example of where maybe you hear or you see something on the news of people protesting because there's going to be a pipeline going somewhere, or the ability to drill wells, and I think I do understand the concern for environmental, and I understand a lot of the concern. I don't think people understand the importance of it, because at the same time, people do want to go home and turn on the heat or the air conditioner, have them work, be able to drive around from place to place. And so these folks that are working in that industry, right? Like literally, these are tough jobs. So these are people that are out in the field in every type of weather. And so like our customers, we have to deliver because what they're doing is critical. And so a lot of times there's a tight timetable. A lot of times there's, a lot of pressure on the cost side for them. Because at the end of the day, people still expect their natural gas to be, whatever, 350 an MCF, and their gas to go in the tank to be at, $3 or less. And they get pretty upset when it's $5, but it'll be 5, 6, 7, 10. I mean, look at Europe if we don't have control of our supply. So yeah, I think it would be great if people appreciated that more.
What has it meant for you to build this in Cleveland?
It's very important. I really am a Cleveland guy. Like I said, family is from here and tied to the area. My wife and I love the area. We'll always have a presence here. And I also, just because of, and you've interviewed a lot of the folks. I mean, there's so many role models, so many people I've watched over the years that I admire that I think are from this area. I think there's something about, and I'm just going to say Midwestern values that I see that I don't see in other places. And I truly appreciate trying to convince my sons that there's some merit. One's in the Northwest, one's in the South. Yeah, it's critical that it's in Cleveland. And, I would love to find, some of the actual companies to be around the area as well. It'd be nice to be able to drive to some of these businesses instead of fly.
You mentioned, certain optimism kind of writ large about American manufacturing and the industry. What are you most excited about just looking forward?
I generally just get excited about having a business plan and having a challenge and going and trying to execute. Since I'm a washed up athlete and can't compete effectively, this is my outlet for you're keeping score and you're trying to work with a team and compete against others that are very capable, but yet win. So that's very motivating. And I think the other thing that's particularly interesting for us is where we, as I mentioned earlier, where we try to incentivize the team with equity. There's some great stories I could tell you where I think the folks that we partnered with didn't even realize what the value was. I mean, most people are looking at
Hmm.
their base salary and the bonus, and this was a throw in, and they didn't. And now that value is 3x their annual salary, it's just really cool to see that realization as an owner and have more of our team appreciate that. To me, that it means a lot, and it's just I think people learn a lot about the value of being an owner, and so we want to continue that. That's another part of sort of our goal as we develop the business is to just have a lot more people that are owners.
You've mentioned the evolution of the playbook over time as you continuously learn new things about how to actually stitch together these companies and build a cohesive culture and holding company ultimately. Is there anything recently that you've changed your mind about in your strategy and approach?
I would say over the last 1 or 2 years, we have intentionally invested more heavily in what I would call the kind of the financial and IT infrastructure in the business. I think that's always been a challenge for us because the businesses we're inheriting literally have nothing, very, very little capability in terms of just infrastructure. So we are trying to get really ahead of, I mean, everyone, we all read about and try to understand the AI impact on our business. And in this case, we're intentionally investing a lot in infrastructure, which I never thought I'd see this, but, we're putting a lot of money into just our own data capture and retention, and then what we're going to do with the data and the ability to just get a lot smarter in how we capture data in our business and then use it effectively going forward. So that's probably one big change. Maybe another one would be how to recruit and how do we scale up. That's always a challenge for us because think about us trying to attract folks that typically not a household name. So we've gotten a little more entrepreneurial and just tried to extend out and try a few things on the recruiting side, including, a few outside recruiters to add into the mix just to do a more effective job of recruiting. And then part of that is just call it the internship side. So our ability to probably bring in a larger group of interns every year. It could be everywhere from sales and marketing, data analytics, finance, where we will have a better control of our pipeline of talent. So that involves a net investment, obviously, for us, because you can't expect folks, they're not jumping into a line role, investing in the future.
You mentioned AI. I feel a little remiss if I didn't ask for your perspective on on automation and how you see that and its implications in your world.
I mean, for us, we're just scratching the surface. But if you think about like the fabrication side of our business, the opportunity is just amazing in terms of just the number of kind of sensors and capturing data at the production level. So whether that's machine maintenance or productivity or output, I mean, those are all data points that are critical to us. We should be capturing automatically that we're not today, because think about a lot of our equipment being analog or older equipment. So I think we'll have the opportunity to not only retrofit some of that equipment, but also in our future. And we just recently, our timing wasn't great because some of this product comes from Europe and the tariff thing has been really disruptive, but think way more automated equipment. So equipment that has more robotics,
Yeah.
equipment that's able to maybe typically, do the job that may take 10 people, it could be two. And then, how do we keep finding a way, getting back to the example I gave earlier about like landfill capture of methane. Think about the amount of data that we're able to collect from not only the equipment that's there, it's a very large facility that's cleaning up that gas and then putting it into a pipeline. Information we're able to get 24/7 that's telling you every part of the gas composition, temperatures, pressures, which gives us the ability to understand what equipment's working well, what's not working well, how do we change the process, things of that nature. So we have a huge open opportunity there that we'll continue to invest in.
What do you feel are the most salient learnings that you keep with you as kind of like guiding wisdom, grounding philosophy that have just kind of grounded you in this whole journey?
I think that I enjoy what I do, and I would tell you that I never set some target that was financial. I'm really not financially motivated. So I tend to get a lot more joy out of just what I said, team victory or accomplishment. And some of that is just with the work that I've done outside of Bridge. It's just, I enjoy working with people that are kind of working for a good cause, trying to help others. But I don't have like some grand plan that says, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. I mean, I want to be a good husband and father, hopefully first. And I think the other things will follow along.
Is there anything in reflection here that you wish I had asked about that feels particularly important that we didn't get to talk about?
Yeah, I think maybe the only thing I'll point out, because it's sort of front of mind just because we've had so much in this area, but it's the whole renewable natural gas area that I mentioned earlier. It's just really exciting. I mean, so the reason it's top of mind right now is because we're in the process, and this is a company that we partnered with 3 years ago, and the entrepreneurial founder is really one of the leaders in the industry. So how do you take methane out of a landfill and turn it into natural gas and do it in a safe manner? And you can use it for power or energy. And so and then you've probably tracked all this. You had the IRA support and tax credits and so on. So it's just been fascinating to learn about. But in this case, it's truly one of those that our team rallies around the fact that the just the facilities we've done already 90 facilities around the world. Just those facilities that are operating today are the equivalent of taking like 300,000 vehicles off the road. Really the
Wow.
amount of CO2 reduction and the methane that we're taking, and cleaning up instead of it going into the air is making a very big impact. And that keeps growing as we continue to build facilities. So that's a good motivator for the team. They feel good about it. So that's been, and it's not I don't think that story is well known kind of in the Cleveland area. We don't have as much going on the renewable side, but I do believe in that area and we'll continue to invest in it.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Well, Jeff, I just want to thank you very much for taking the time to share a little bit more about your story. It's very much in the spirit of this podcast. It's kind of unbelievable to me what you've built, and in some regards, how under the radar I feel it might be. And it's really it's quite inspirational for me to see what it is that you built.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your story because I think it's interesting that you somehow figured out at an earlier age that this entrepreneurship thing was something you could kind of make a career. And in my case, it took a while to kind of figure that out. And then even when you had sent me the concept about, entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is, it's a great buzzword, but I think that's a real thing. I think and it just resonated with me where it's, wow, you can do that and get paid for it. It's a lot of fun. I definitely enjoy doing it.
Well, I'll ask you then our traditional closing question, which is for a hidden gem in Cleveland.
Yeah, I will say, and I know you interviewed Zimmerman from the Metro Parks. I always tell people from anywhere that, where they'll listen, that the Metro Parks is, I don't know if I'd call it hidden, but not everyone takes advantage of it. It's just truly special where, from my perspective, living in Chagrin Falls, there are several choices, but anyone in the Cleveland area can
Yep.
pretty quickly be in a very nice place that is going to be well maintained. They seem to constantly upgrade the Metro Parks. So that's been pretty cool. And the other thing I would add is I think the entrepreneurs, the people you're interviewing, are hidden gems. I mean, I think these are folks that a lot of people are not aware of all the work they've done. And I think it's a great community. And so I think that's another hidden gem.
Well, that certainly resonates with the spirit of this. So thank you, Jeff. Very much appreciate you taking the time here. That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternfa, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.